Think you got what it takes to run for president of the most powerful nation on earth? Well, you probably do, seeing as that bar has been historically set pretty low at times. And with 2020 around the corner, people around America are even now beginning to consider their candidacy for the highest office in the land. But just how does one get into the Oval Office and a chance to push the biggest, reddest button in the world? For starters, you're going to need to make sure you even qualify for the job, and that means being a natural-born citizen of the United States. With 37 million immigrants in the United States, that's going to knock out a sizable chunk of competition. Next, you have to be at least 35 years old, which is bad news for Sarah Blair of West Virginia, who at 18 was the youngest person ever elected to state or federal office in the United States. Also not qualifying is James Tufts, who was 3 years old in 2012 when he was elected mayor of the town of Dorset, a town with a population of 22. Next, you'll have to have made sure that you were a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. So if you were born in the US, a natural citizen, but took off to live abroad, no dice for you. We suppose the Founding Fathers thought that it might be dangerous to elect a president who was heavily influenced by a foreign, potentially hostile nation. Be 35 or older, a 14-year resident, and a natural-born citizen. Meet those standards and you are free to declare your candidacy for president at any time. Although once you receive campaign contributions up to or spend more than $5,000, you must register with the Federal Election Commission. That's the agency that we in the US trust to enforce campaign finance law and that helps keep foreign money out of our political system so that candidates aren't compromised. Of course, it would be easier to simply make elections federally funded to ensure no funny business, but think about all those poor lobbyists who'd be out of the job. Next stop on your road to presidency is your state and primary caucuses. Both help to narrow the pool of candidates from each political party. A caucus and a primary work much the same way. A group of voters each cast their vote for a nominee. However, caucuses are limited to the parties the voters are registered for only, while some primaries, known as open primaries, allow a voter of any political party to vote for the nominee they like best. However, a voter cannot go to their car, put on a disguise, and then vote in a second primary for another political party. That'd be voter fraud. Leading up to the primaries or caucuses, though, you're going to want to be on the road every single day. You want to make sure your message reaches as many people as possible so you can drum up as much support as possible. You're also going to need funds to run campaign ads and finance your election team. In a common sense system, those funds would come from a federal election pool to ensure candidates weren't compromised by lobbyists and to ensure a true democracy where poor candidates weren't disadvantaged by richer candidates. Instead, though, candidates are free to beg, scrape, borrow, and promise any amount of favors and influence should they win the White House in exchange for cold, hard cash now. So you're going to be putting in a lot of footwork as you move from fundraiser to fundraiser and take meetings with special interest group after special interest group. Remember to always be flexible with your principles or just outright discard them. All the while you're shaking babies and kissing hands. Or is it the other way around? You'll want to make sure your campaign manager finds out ASAP you're going to be keeping an eye on your political party's national convention. That's the Super Bowl of party politics, and though a clear frontrunner is typically identified early on, sometimes the national convention serves to confirm a single nominee. At each convention, Republican and Democratic, there are a group of delegates which must be swayed over to your side if you want a chance at your party's nomination. These delegates are split into two main groups. Pledged or bound delegates are required to support the candidate that the people gave the most votes to during their party's primaries or caucuses. Unpledged or unbound delegates, or also known as superdelegates, are free to completely ignore democracy and the people's votes both and simply vote as they see fit. How do superdelegates fit into a democratic system? They don't. They're an affront to the very idea of democracy and should be abolished immediately, but we'll go ahead and tell you anyways. The 1972 Democratic Senator George Mcgovern won the overwhelming support of Democratic voters, but in the national election faced Senator Edmund Muskie, who was the favorite of the Democratic Party establishment. Mcgovern, however, was so beloved by Democrats that he completely trounced Muskie and thus won the party nomination, only to go up against President Nixon in the general election and give the Democrats one of their most humiliating defeats in history. In the final vote, Democrats won only Massachusetts and the District of Columbia. Incensed and determined to never suffer such an overwhelming defeat, the leaders of the Democratic Party established a VIP category of delegates who would vote however they saw fit, completely ignoring the wishes of the voters. These superdelegates wouldn't even have to be voted into their positions. They would simply be appointed by senior party leaders and end up making 30% of the total delegate count, ensuring some measure of control over who wins the nomination, and that democracy would be in no way served. Though Republicans also make use of superdelegates, theirs are limited to only 3 per state and obliged to vote for their state's popular vote winner. To have a chance at winning your party's nomination at the National Convention, you're going to want to toe the party line and make sure you please as many delegates as possible. However, if no nominee has their party's majority of delegates going into the convention, this can result in a brokered or contested convention, where delegates must vote for their candidates. Pledged delegates must vote for the candidate they are pledged to, but after the final round of voting are free to choose any candidate if their candidate doesn't make it past the first round. The 2 national conventions are pretty much modern Thunderdomes. Many men and sometimes women enter, but only one will exit victorious. Now you're ready for prime time, the general election. This is the big show and where every single embarrassing secret, guffaw, mistake, and poor taste tweet you've ever posted will be put on full public display. If the national conventions are Thunderdomes, the general election is a one-on-one, no-holds-barred death match. And at stake is the ultimate prize, the presidency of the United States. But it's not as easy as simply campaigning, talking to people, and spreading your message. You're going to have to be strategic about your time and money. That's because both are limited, and because the presidency is not actually decided by individual votes, but rather by a process known as the Electoral College. The Electoral College is an institution held over from an early compromise made by the Founding Fathers. While most supported a popular vote election, many, most of whom already held some form of political power, insisted that they would grudgingly allow the peasants to vote for each party's presidential nominees. A bunch of normals surely couldn't be trusted to vote for the actual president. That'd be preposterous. Thus, they believed that only the US Congress should vote for president, in a kinda sorta not really democratic way. With a brand new nation already on the verge of collapse and England gleefully waiting for a chance to strike should it, the Founding Fathers came to a compromise. The president would be elected by an electoral college, with each state receiving a number of electors based on how many members of Congress that state has, and with absolutely no constitutional obligation to even vote for the person who won their state's popular vote. US territories, on the other hand, would pay taxes but mind their own business and receive no electors. How the Founding Fathers missed that bit of the irony given their cause of the recent rebellion is beyond us. So with your money and time running out, you're going to want to prioritize which states you actually campaign in, aiming for all the states that have the highest number of electors. States with few electors, or those that polls show are heavily made up of the opposing political party, are going to be very low priorities for you. Come election day, all your hard work is going to pay off, and the Electoral College will do its job by ignoring the votes cast by the people and deciding for themselves who gets to be president.